our precinct captains, Ryan, Kathy, and Kitty, along with our next president, Hillary Clinton.
Please be seated and just know how grateful I am that you all are here. The home of the Wingding, as well as other important historical sites, as you know so well. I want to thank Erin. She's one of the great team of young organizers that we have across Iowa, and I just can't thank her and all of them enough. They are, they leave their homes, they come here, many of you are helping them. Thank you for that. I'm going to introduce in a minute the precinct captains who are here on stage with me. But first, I want to recognize and thank your Attorney General, Tom Miller. Where is Tom? There he is. Thank you, Tom. I'm so honored and grateful to have earned his support. He has such a record of public service and accomplishments here in Iowa. And sitting next to him is your treasurer, Mike Fitzgerald, another person who has year after year consistently really delivered for the people of Iowa. And again, I'm so grateful to Mike for his support. I also want to recognize and thank two of your local legislators, Amanda Reagan, state senator, right here in Mason City. I'm just thrilled that she has endorsed me. I am so grateful to Amanda and really look forward to working with her in the years to come. And also, State Representative Sharon Steckman, also from Mason City. Sharon, thank you so very much. I am grateful for her endorsement. I know a little bit about how challenging it is to be a woman in public life, and they are two great examples of getting things done, standing up for their constituents and the values that you all share, and I could not be more honored to have them supporting you. I also want to thank John Stone. Where's John? John was out here earlier. John, thank you for your endorsement. Now, I want to introduce you to three people in a minute who are precinct captains for me because they want to share some of their concerns with you. And the reason I think this is important is, I started this campaign here in Iowa promising to listen to people. And I've done a lot of that. And I have sure learned so much because of it. I learned about what's on people's minds. I learned about the issues that folks are worried about. And I also got suggestions for solutions, ways that we can roll up our sleeves and get to work together. I think that's something we need more of in America right now. We should be listening to each other and respecting each other's opinions, learning from each other, trying to figure out what works best. Your Attorney General and your Treasurer have been returned to office time and time again by the people of Iowa because that's exactly what they do. They go after problems that people tell them about, or ones that they see that then they go and ask folks about. I want us to get back to doing that in Washington. I will work as hard as I can to find common ground. I will go anywhere to talk to anybody, anytime, about trying to solve problems. I did that when I was First Lady. I did it as a senator. I did it as Secretary of State. And I think we need more of that today. I think it's important that we try to find ways to actually agree instead of blowing up and exaggerating all the ways we disagree. And when we get to your questions on any issue that you have or any idea that you might want to suggest about what we can do better. But I will also stand my ground because I think it's important too that we chart a steady course into the future, building on what has worked and doing better. That gives us the opportunity to make a big difference in the lives of Americans because we have to get the economy working again. And I know what that means because I have watched two Democratic presidents, namely my husband and President Obama, inherit economic problems from their Republican predecessors and have to work hard to overcome them. In my husband's case, it was a recession and the quadrupling of our national debt in the prior 12 years. So he really had to get to work, and we ended up with 23 million new jobs, incomes rising for everybody, not just folks at the top, lifting more people out of poverty than at any time in recent history, and ending up with a balanced budget and a surplus. Now, unfortunately, the Republicans they're just, you got to give them credit. They are consistent. They're just determined to keep pursuing the same failed economic policies. You know, you call it trickle-down economics. You know, what they think works, cut taxes on the wealthy, get out of the way of corporations, doesn't work. For the vast majority of people, it may work for their donors, it may work for their special interests, but it sure doesn't work for most Americans. And I was in the Senate starting in 2001, and I voted against a lot of what President Bush and his administration wanted to do on the economy. Didn't matter, they kept going. And you know what happened. They put us into the worst financial crisis since the Great Depression. So along comes President-elect Obama, and he inherits all of that. Losing 800,000 jobs a month, 9 million Americans ended up losing their jobs. 5 million homes lost, $13 trillion in family wealth disappeared. And I don't think President Obama gets the credit he deserves for making sure we didn't fall into a great recession. So here we are once again, and we're arguing about what direction to take the economy. I listen to the Republicans, and honestly, they live in an evidence-free zone. They are not well acquainted with the facts about what works when it comes to creating more good-paying jobs and raising incomes. I'm not running for my husband's third term. I'm not running for President Obama's third term. I'm running for my first term, but I'm going to do what works to build an economy that once again will provide greater opportunities for people willing to work for it. And of course, I will do what it takes to keep us safe and secure, too. That is something I feel absolutely confident that we can do if we're smart about it. You know, all those slogans you heard from the Republicans last night, those are not strategies. And the thing that really bothers me is they act like they can just wave a magic wand or say, carpet bomb the desert. And that somehow is going to defeat ISIS. Well, I got news for them. You got to have a strong, smart strategy. And you have to be committed to it, and you have to follow through on it. So I've been laying out my plans about how we will defeat ISIS by fighting them in the air, getting the Arabs and the Kurds more help so they can fight them on the ground, and fighting them online, where they use the internet to propagandize, recruit, and glorify violence. But one thing I know for sure is that we're going to have to cooperate with a lot of other nations and people to get this done. And you hear a lot of talk about how we need to build a coalition to defeat ISIS. Well, we do. And I know a little bit about building coalitions. I built the coalition that imposed the sanctions on Iran and forced them to the negotiating table so that we could put a lid on their nuclear weapons program. And that included Russia and China. Well, you don't start off talking about building a coalition by insulting the people you need in the coalition. Right? And when you think about, Mr. Trump and his outrageous comments and the comments of some of the other candidates, that's not only shameful, saying no Muslims can come to America and all the other things that they are talking about. That's dangerous. It plays right into the hands of ISIS. They want it to be a conflict between Islam and the West. We have 1.5 billion Muslims in the world. What we want is to have it be a conflict between all civilized people and the barbarians that misuse religion in order to seize territory and impose power over people who are oppressed. And I'm going to do everything I can to keep trying to talk in a reasonable way about what we can achieve if we have the right strategies and we have the right people making the decisions. So we'll get to that when we get to your Q&A, but I want to introduce Kitty Classing and Catherine Crooks and Ryan Arndorfer, each of whom is going to speak about why they're interested in this campaign, what they think is at stake, what motivates them, because we want all of you to be part of this campaign. We want you all to be involved as we move toward the caucus on February 1st. We want you to sign up to do whatever it is you feel you can do, and we sure do hope you will come out and caucus. So let's start right here. Thank you all. Thank the three of you. I am so grateful to each of them who are so instrumental in my campaign here in this larger Mason City area. And I know that with your leadership, we're going to do really well on February 1st. Thank you all so much. Now, you've heard from three people who have thought hard about what to do in this caucus, and I'm grateful they are supporting me. But now I'd like to hear from all of you. Anything that you have on your mind, any issue, and I am more than happy to talk about everything I'm proposing, but I'm also happy to hear from you, so we can do a little bit of both. Yes, ma'am, right there. Here comes the microphone.
Our prisons are so overpopulated today. Can you make a plan so that we can stop supporting all these people in prison, some of them for very minor crimes, and put that to education for our kids?
Great question. The reason why this has become an increasingly important question to figure out how to answer is that we have 5% of the world's population and we have 25% of the world's prisoners. And a lot of people are in our jails and prisons for low-level, non-violent offenses. A lot of them are there waiting for trial. They haven't been able to get bail, so they're in jail or prison just waiting, sometimes a year or two. So there are some really serious issues that we have to address. And I think we can safely and effectively divert a lot of low-level, non-violent offenders away from jail and prison into drug courts, for example. You have a couple of drug courts here in Iowa, and there are drug courts across the country, so that when someone has a drug problem, maybe they're caught using, or maybe they're caught buying, or even selling a very small amount, give them another chance by telling them if they can go into treatment, if they can recover, they'll be tested, and if they come out without having fallen back to using drugs, they won't go to prison. Now, why is that a good idea? Well, it's a good idea because Number one, a lot of the people who go into prison for low-level offenses, lots of them drug-related offenses, come out in much worse shape and come out much more likely to cause problems in our communities. But it's also a good alternative because it's a lot cheaper. And you know, it costs about $30,000 a year to send somebody to prison. That money, as you rightly point out, could be used to try to keep people out of prison, to get them the mental health treatment they need, to get them the addiction treatment they need, to help get them the job skills that they might need so they can become a productive member of society. And I saw a great example of a community program in Reno, Nevada that made a big impression on me. It's run by the sheriff's office in the county and by Catholic Charities. And I went to see it because they had, about 4 years ago, decided that they weren't getting anywhere. They were picking the same people up who had alcoholism, putting them in jail, then they'd get out, a little while later, they'd be picked up again, having the ambulance come if they were passed out, taking them to the emergency room. And some law enforcement folks and some people at Catholic Charities said, let's try something different. So they set up a facility that had a safe place, it had a place for people to spend the night, and it had counseling, and it had work that people had to do. I went to visit it. It's called Crossroads. And they have now served a couple hundred folks who were in and out of prison, in and out of the hospital. And they've helped a lot of them. They get them tested every day. They have to have the breathalyzer test 3 times a day. And the sheriff told me they saved $4 million the first year. Saved it on jail costs, saved it on hospital costs, and emergency room costs, and ambulance costs. And that's the kind of new thinking we should be looking at, so that we can help people who are not violent, not repeat criminals, not serious offenders. You know, those folks still have to go to jail. And, you know, that's just a fact. But for folks that we can divert, many of whom do have mental health problems and substance abuse problems, I think we should look around the country, and I'm sure going to as president, and try to figure out what folks are already doing that works and do more of it. So that's my hope as we move forward. Yes, sir. Here you go.
Thank you for taking my question. I'm wondering if we can talk a little bit about the gun control issue. I and many Iowans in this country right now feel like the very civility of our nation is at stake. And so my question is twofold. As president, when you tackle this issue, how would you convince members of Congress to think past the influence of the gun lobby? And then secondly, here in Iowa, we have thousands and thousands of responsible gun owners with a long and rich family tradition of hunting. How can we bring them in and convey to them that all of us are on the same side when it comes to this issue? Thank you.
Thank you for asking that. You know, I think there are two facts that are important to think of at the same time. Number one, 90 people a day die from gun violence. That's homicides, suicides, and tragic avoidable accidents. That's 33,000 people a year. If anything else were killing 33,000 people a year, we would say, hey, what can we do to try to prevent that? How do we work better together? That's one thing I want you to keep in mind. The other is that the agenda that I have supported, and that is comprehensive background checks, closing the gun show loophole, closing the online loophole, closing what's called the Charleston loophole, ending the immunity from liability for makers and sellers, is supported by 92% of the American public and 85% of gun owners. So a consensus already exists, where, as you rightly say, the vast majority of gun owners in America are responsible people, and they take They have, you know, a love of guns, whether it's target shooting or hunting or collecting, but they also are careful about what they do. And I think we have to try to get responsible gun owners to lead the effort to get more common sense gun safety measures enacted. Because the way the gun lobby works is like any lobby. I mean, if you're a big lobby for any organization or any cause, you have to keep people sending money in. And so you gotta keep people upset and nervous. You gotta make them think that something bad is gonna happen or they may not join up again. So it's not only the gun lobby, it's any lobby in Washington. The way they make their money, and they make a bunch of it, is to keep people all wrought up. And so if you keep them wrought up by telling them things that aren't necessarily, you know, even connected to reality, they're certainly not true, then, you know, the money keeps flowing in. And that's what we've got. So I think, of course, moms who demand action, you know, dads who care deeply about the safety of their children, elected officials who know we've got to do something and we already have a consensus that is out there in the American public. We need to be all working together, and I would look for, you know, responsible gun owners. And ever since I've been talking about this the last few months, I've gotten emails and letters, and I've met people at events who have said, you know, look, I want to be part of that. Where do I go? And I said, well, I don't know, because that's something that you all will have to decide where to go and how to do this. But as president, I would work with responsible gun owners. You know, my dad had guns. I learned to shoot. I learned to hunt. I mean, I have a great respect for the culture, but I have a great sense of sadness and distress at the cost of irresponsibility and violence being inflicted on our country. So we must work together. We must find a way to implement this very important agenda. And here's how far gone the gun lobby is. They put pressure on Republicans in Congress this last couple of weeks not to pass a law prohibiting people who are on the no-fly list from buying a gun. I find that just beyond understanding. If you are too dangerous to fly in America, you are too dangerous to buy a gun in America. If you don't think you belong on the list, you appeal to the Attorney General. You can sue them to get off the list. But there are a lot of people on that list, from my understanding over the years that I've been doing this, who should be on the list. So let's not be so blind that we won't even try to do whatever we can to keep guns out of the hands of terrorists, as well as others who should not have them, as we have tragically seen with all of these deaths over the past years. So my hope is that we can build a real, you know, grassroots movement, that gun owners make a big effort to lead so that we can rebut some of these foolish fears that the gun lobby unfortunately peddles, and save some lives while we're doing it. Yes, sir. Yes, right there. Here comes the microphone.
Thank you, Secretary Clinton. I spent 28 years as an Army officer, and I watched the debates last night and heard every single candidate up there talk about carpet bombing, talking about putting more boots back on the ground. I did not hear a single Republican candidate mention anything about veterans. I would like to give you an opportunity to explain your vision for veterans care in your administration.
Thank you, and thanks for asking the question, and thanks for doing it from the perspective of those 28 years serving our country. I am absolutely committed to three things when it comes to our veterans. Number one, don't send the American military any place we shouldn't send them to do anything that is not appropriate and necessary. And I've feel very strongly about this. That's why when I hear all the talk from yesterday, it really is upsetting because it's very loose talk and it has little to do with the reality that we have to face up to and try to deal with. Number two, I will do everything I can to make sure our veterans get the services and benefits they are entitled to, starting with the VA, which has systemic problems that are being addressed by the Veterans Administration. But I want us to make sure we actually solve them. I think the new team that's in there has shown a very good and effective approach, but we got to weed out the problems, leadership problems, program problems, and I would put a SWAT team of retired and active duty, military, experts in health, experts in organization to work immediately, and I would ask for a weekly report from whoever is running the VA under my presidency to bring me up to date. What are we doing about the wait lists? What are we doing about some of the problems that have come to light in the last months? I think it's also important, though, to oppose efforts by Republicans to privatize the VA. I think that would be a terrible mistake for our veterans and our country. And a lot of the talk you hear, you have to listen to it carefully because that's really what their ultimate goal is. And the VA does have problems. A lot of our healthcare institutions have problems and we need to fix them. But the VA also provides world-class help, and some of it is unique, like prosthetics. There is no place in the world that has done more research, done more application of state-of-the-art prosthetics, as just one example. And then thirdly, we have to focus on all the benefits, in particularly the backlog on disability claims. This is something we have told veterans they're entitled to, and then their claims sit for years. And we're making a little progress, but again, it's not fast enough. And I would, again, want to summon a group of people to work with me, work with the administration, to try to catch up on all of these unanswered disability claims. So I think that it's important that we start from the premise that we have active duty military personnel, and they need to be given missions and support that is in keeping with the national interests and security of the United States. They need to have the equipment and the other kinds of necessary help to be as successful as possible. The Pentagon needs to be run, number one, with a total focus of attention on the well-being of our troops, and everything else should be secondary. And then we have to make sure the institutions that have been created, both in healthcare and benefits, function effectively in this modern online age. I think it's important to recognize that a lot of the young vets who are coming back are facing some difficult reentry issues, as has been the case in prior generations. That's why it's really critical we have the GI Bill, the modern version of the GI Bill, working effectively. And there's been some very unfortunate developments because some of the for-profit colleges have taken advantage of our vets, taken their federal money and not produced an education that will get them a job. So I want to crack down on some of the really fraudulent and other behavior, cracking down on payday lending outside of bases and things like that really put our active duty and our young vets at risk. But I'd be really interested in any other ideas that you or anyone else has, because I've rolled out my veterans policy. I am adamant that we have got to place the care and support of our veterans at the top of our priority list, and that if there are hard choices to be made with respect to the budget, we have to choose to support our veterans. That to me is an absolute necessity, and I will do everything I can as president to make it happen. Yes, what about this young woman right there? Here comes somebody with a microphone.
Hello, Secretary Clinton. My name is Cassandra Lopez, and I am a high school student at Fairmont Junior Senior High School. I am here today to show my support for you with some of my classmates and my superintendent. My question for you is, after 8 years of a Clinton presidency, what is your vision for America in 2024?
Well, that's such a good question. That's really so impressive. Thank you. And thanks to your superintendent and the other students who are here. I think that's the right way to go at this. I think you should think about where you want to end up and then work backwards to try to understand everything you have to do to get to those goals. And for me, I'm in this race because I feel incredibly lucky to have been born in America with parents who believed in the promise of America and just did everything they could to instill in me, good work habits and good values and a good sense of giving back and service. And I want young people today to feel as I felt, that the promise of America is theirs if they do their part, if they work hard, if they do what they need to be prepared, they're going to be rewarded. And there are too many people in our country right now who don't feel that way. They feel kind of left out and left behind. So what I want at the end of 8 years is an economy that is producing a lot of good jobs with rising incomes again, so that a parent can look at a child and say, you're going to have a good future. You stay in school, maybe go to the community college and get those skills so that you can get a job right here in Iowa and have a good economic, prosperous life. Or maybe get a 4-year degree. And you know what? We're going to make tuition debt-free so that kids can actually afford to go to college again and not be burdened by all this debt. And we're going to help everybody who currently has debt refinance that debt so they can save thousands of dollars so that in 8 years they'll be better prepared to go out into the world. We're also going to fight climate change by creating more clean, renewable energy jobs, which will give a whole new area for young people to be part of. And, I've got to compliment Iowa. I do it all over the country, not just when I'm in Iowa. I say, we're going to do this, and, I see a little skepticism on some faces. And then I say, did you know Iowa currently gets 1/3 of its electricity from renewables, mostly wind? And is also pioneering advanced biofuels. We have folks in Iowa right now trying to figure out how you can fuel jets, military jets, as well as commercial jets, ocean liners, as well as naval vessels on biofuels. Iowa is helping to create the future. I want the entire country to be creating the future, and I want young people to get excited about how they can make a contribution. I'm going to do everything I can to make education, primary and secondary education work, and I'm going to start with what seems like a pretty obvious idea by talking to teachers and listening to the teachers who are in the classrooms for America. And I think it's really important to try to get more little kids early childhood education so that when they get to kindergarten, they're ready to learn. Too many of them come in behind, they never catch up, and no matter how hard their teachers work, they don't ever fully get the education they need. I also want to be sure that by the time I finish as president, we're not only dealing with health care and the Affordable Care Act, but we've improved it. We've got the cost down. We've got more people able to afford their health care. And we have gotten the cost of prescription drugs down because right now it's the fastest growing part of a lot of families' budgets. And there's more we can do to try to get that, under control and be more reasonable. And then there are three big issues that I hope we have made progress on. The first is the caregiving crisis. How many of you have cared for or know somebody with Alzheimer's or some other condition that required family care and that you really had to dig deep financially and physically and emotionally to provide it? Well, more families are going to face that. And I think we should do more to support the caregivers in America. You know, at the end of the day, the most important things in life are your family and your relationships. You know, there's that wonderful saying that I read one time. Nobody on his deathbed ever says, oh, I wish I'd spent more time at the office. I mean, we've got to do more to support the importance of caregiving. And we have to remove the stigma from mental health so that we get more treatment and more support for people with mental health problems. And as I said earlier, we've got to tackle addiction. Why do I talk about addiction and mental health? Because from the very first trip I made to Iowa back in April, that's what people talked to me about. In very small settings, folks would say, hey, you know, I can't find help for my, son with depression. I can't find help for my daughter with bipolar disorder. I can't find help for my child or my husband with, alcoholism or drug addiction. Even when people want help, it's not there. And I want to say a word. I think your governor's making a terrible mistake in this rush. There are more than 500,000, isn't that right, Tom? Mike, there's more than 500,000 Iowans on Medicaid. Some of the poorest, most vulnerable, elderly folks who need help in nursing homes. And this rush, I don't understand this rush to force people into these new programs under these, new contracts. And I want us to have a healthcare system that is quality and affordable and helps keep people well as treating them when they're sick. And that includes mental health and substance abuse. I also hope at the end of 8 years, we will have learned how to work with each other again in our political system. I don't believe any of us have all the answers. I don't think any of us are that wise, right? Yeah, there are people who think they do. Have you noticed? Yeah, we don't want the divided states of America. And the way we avoid that is by having people actually talk and listen to each other and try to find common ground, even compromise, where that is necessary and appropriate. I also want to be sure that we have regained and really gone beyond the need in our country for people to feel positive and optimistic and confident. We've had tough times as a nation before. You all know that. Some of you have lived through some hard times. And I don't understand the anger and the pessimism and all of the lashing out that I see coming from the Republican side. I think we do better when we set goals together and we believe we can meet those goals. And then we work to do just that. And I want us once again to feel that way about our country. You see, I think we already are a great country. Unlike Mr. Trump, I think we are a great country, but I think we have work to do. I think we have work to do because we can't take anything for granted. Every generation has to, once again, make the right choices, make the right investments. We don't have any guarantees. We have to keep doing what it takes to move our country forward. So I'm going to work as hard as I can to win the support of the people here in Iowa in the caucus, and then hopefully win Iowa in November of 2016, and then have a presidency that produces positive economic results, restores and builds on our strong position in the world, and makes us the leader in peace and prosperity everywhere, and fixes our democracy so that it works to help us solve our problems together. You know, I've been saying on the campaign trail from time to time that, you know, it's unusual for anybody running for president to say, you know, we need more love and kindness in America. But honestly, I think we do. And I think it's important that we reach out and help each other. You know, no president can do everything that needs to be done. That's obvious. You know, we all have to do our part. That's what this community is about here in Mason City and across Iowa. Some of you know that, you know, my mother had a terrible childhood. She was rejected and abandoned by her parents, sent to live with grandparents who didn't want her, and by the age of 14, she was out working as a housemaid in somebody's home. I didn't know any of that when I was a little girl, and as I learned more about it as I got older, I was just stunned. You know, I said, how did you do it? How did you keep going? And she said to me, even though my own family didn't want me, there were people who were kind to me. And that made all the difference. They treated me like I mattered. You know, that first grade teacher who brought her food when she didn't have anything for lunch, and even the woman whose house she went to work in at the age of 14. And that woman knew that my mother wanted to go to high school. And she said to her, you know, if you get up really early, you get your chores done, you can go to high school. You'll have to come right back. But you can go to high school. And maybe that sounds kind of harsh to students today, being 14 and being told that. To my mother, it was a gift. So she'd get up early and she'd get those chores done and she'd run to high school and she'd come back. She never got to graduate from college, but she felt like the caring and the love and the kindness of others kept her going. So I want to be a president who at the end of 2 terms has seen much more of that great spirit of our country again. That great generosity of heart that de Tocqueville wrote about all those years ago when he came to this country. And he talked about our habits of the heart, where we were so different from anybody in Europe, and that's what he couldn't really understand. We banded together to help each other. We reached out hands of caring and compassion. That's what I want us to do. And to do it in a way that cuts through all the negativity and all of the, you know, inflammatory rhetoric, so that once again, we're setting a good example for our kids, and we're fulfilling our real destiny as Americans. Because we're not just a nation, we are an idea. And it's an idea that has meant so much to succeeding generations here in our country, and still is such a beacon of hope and freedom and opportunity for people around the world. Let's be proud of that. Let's stand up for that. Let's make it real. Thank you all very much.